to think that. But it's interesting. And this is the variance of the numbers in botnets. Now, if Semantic wants, the gentleman from Semantic wants to argue, if I read, I believe it was ISTR number 9 correctly, it was suggesting that there might be hope in the stabilization out here. Or let me back up one. There might be hope in this stabilization out here that perhaps we were doing something that was causing there to be an upper bound here, that this might be a good thing. And I'm not going to argue that because it would be wonderful if it were true. There's a different way to look at it, though, just to tell you that when you look at these things as you're trying to interpret the future, it's hard. It's hard. And I believe that whether it's Symantec or any other firm, again, interpretation is where the work is. It's where the work is. But I could interpret this just as easily as the predators have all the prey they can eat. They don't need any more than this, or we don't see them anymore. They're not showing their hand as well. If I read current Symantec numbers correctly, it's about 1% of the bots that show themselves on any given day. That's of the ones we know about. And of course, all of these have a little disclaimer of those we know about, comma. That's almost every sentence I speak will be of that category. So it could be that this is a sign of success.
But we actually need better cooperation of the bot writers.
Okay, look. I am supposed to repeat for the tape what you say. And so, if I got it right, your statement is the bot writers ought to cooperate with us more or we can't do better than this. And we need more cooperation from the bot writers.
We need better data from them.
We need better data from them. Yes. Well, after having reviewed all the functions that are available in, say, for example, FatBot, it's clear they could give you the data. It's clear they've got it. So I'll keep going here. DOS attacks continue to climb today. I didn't put up the current graph here, but they continue to climb. And this is, I happen to think it's the prey being left on the field, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong. There are a variety of people out there who are making estimates about what fraction of all, for example, home computers are owned in some way or other. I've seen estimates all over the map. I have guessed 15%. By the way, I'm sure you know this. If you want to ask a question on the internet, you want other people to give you advice, you ask a question naively, no one answers. You make a false claim, everybody comes out of the woodwork to tell you why you're wrong. Therefore, the art of asking a question is to make a false claim such that the corrections you get answer the question that you wanted to ask in the first place. Now, that being said, I inadvertently did exactly that by having an extra 0 in something I wrote once, and everybody came out of the woodwork to tell me why I was wrong, but it was wonderful. It was actually wonderful. I highly recommend it if you can stand the incoming rocks and bottles. It's actually wonderful. And I made that error, but I'm thinking that roughly 15%. Now, I'm trying to think who the hell I saw the other day. It was somebody important. It wasn't Poneman, but it was somebody like that, saying that his estimate was 40%. Well, we're in the same order of magnitude now. In other words, a large measurable fraction. And that's an important thing to think about because there's certainly places where it's hard to get rid of them once you got them. Let's look at vulnerabilities. Again, I'll take Symantec's numbers brought up to date. This is a curve going up. Now, again, what I'm looking at here is not so much this is the shape of it. What I'm thinking is think of the amount of effort that every software supplier is putting into not having vulnerabilities in their code. And it has risen. It continues to rise. There's lots of startup companies that will help you with this problem. It's not like there is an effort being put in here, and yet here's the curve. Now, that tells me that either there's a delay factor between putting in that effort and the effect. In other words, this, like day length peaks and then later temperature peaks. It's like the seasons in some way, that whatever we're doing here isn't the answer yet. Because the level of effort to prevent this has risen spectacularly, and yet this continues to climb, and that's the most they've ever seen. We have a local maximum. This is the curve of cumulative, 26x. If we said there hadn't been any prior to the first half of 2001, and we just counted them from there, we were up 26x. This is a different set of numbers. The NIST person still here? Hi. This is, I believe, your numbers. I stole them fair and square. What was that? Hayakawa's remark about the Panama Canal, right? We stole it fair and square. I stole them fair and square. I don't actually like how you put them up, but that's beside the point. They're your numbers. Here they are. And this was remote vulns up through 2005. My understanding is that you've stopped publishing this as it is here, you're publishing a different set of numbers. This always frustrates the dickens out of me, which is not a comment to you. It's just that kind of thing frustrates the dickens out of me. But this draws an interesting picture. Not a bad picture. This is not a bad picture. I just, regraphed the page you saw on the other one. Time now runs left to right. There's now a visual cue as to whether it's big or small. I didn't really like the table format, but you can get to this with no trouble. So this says, overall, there's some progress. Now, I thought, well, that's interesting. How about I look at the compound annual growth rate, or in this case, the depression rate, of these various ones, and it varies sort of all over the map, from plus 81% to minus 73%. So some areas we were getting better, and some areas we were not getting better over this 4-year interval that was reported in that table. Now you're beginning to look at something. Because it would say, amongst other things, well, maybe that tells me where I should put some effort. Or maybe it tells me where the effort I'm putting is actually useful. So maybe there's some characteristic of the effort I'm actually putting that I could then use in other sectors. So this is a way of looking at that. Overall, it's a 36% drop compound annual growth rate. Now, I thought it was slightly more interesting to say, well, let's look at some market share. If you take this as a market problem, that every year there's 100% of the vulns, of the remote vulns, where were they? And if I do that, then what I get is this picture. So it's a constant 100% across the top. And that tells me something. That tells me that non-server applications, little things that people write to put on their DMZ or what have you, or applications that are in some way or other not server grade, they have a definition of server versus non-server. That tells me something's going on here. Now this is partly, if we cured heart disease tomorrow, cancer would be a much bigger deal, because of course you have to die of something. But on the other hand, this tells me that there might be some place there where I should be focusing different than I'm focusing today. And this is a market share look at the same number. In other words, what I'm saying is, I don't know how they collected the numbers, and I'm not even sure they're right, but let's suppose for the moment at least they make the same error every time so I can look at the ratios. Might be interesting. And in fact, if I do a simple regression on that, it says by the end of this year, all of the action, just continuing this curve out here, all the action ought to be in this green sector. That's why I made this prediction about 5 months ago, and I was hoping that I would then get called in public on, you got it right, you got it wrong, because there would be numbers. Unfortunately, apparently there's not going to be numbers, but maybe I can find them by methods other than the pure open source read the web page approach that I've been using. So anyway, this is interesting. It says that in 2006, it should be people worrying about the non-server apps that they have as being the place where remote vulnerabilities are common. And that's not a surprise, by the way. That's not a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise. I don't know if I want to bother with these. I'll just jump over them. This is, for a while, Symantec was reporting on other people buying vulnerabilities. I saw a question the other day I was asked a question the other day from Ryan Narain of, I guess he's at eWeek now? And he said, make a prediction. This is one of those things where, make a prediction and be shown wrong. But make a prediction on when Microsoft will have to start buying vulnerabilities, when they're going to have to decide that that's what all that cash is for, is to corner the market in their own vulns. And that's an interesting question. If you want to answer that one too, I'm sure he would take further commentary at this point, but it's an interesting question. They've got $50 billion, it's underperforming. Maybe that's the best thing they could do. This is a little bit about bought vulnerabilities. That was the number, this is the severity. This, if you multiply number times severity, and then you take a cumulative. Again, not important. This turns out not to be as interesting as it might be, but I'm just trying to show what can you get. What can you get? But if this was true, then for the interval shown here, the business of trying to buy vulns outside, like iDefense does, for example, might be yielding something. But we would never know whether we are buying those that were thought to be second rate, whether we're shopping at the company store and buying the seconds, which is what I think actually what it would be like. I grew up in the South. My dad worked for textile mills. I was clothed in seconds my whole life. If you know what that means, that's great. If you don't, forget it. But it could well be that if we were going to buy vulns, that's what we'd be buying, is we'd buy all the seconds. This is, again, astonishing increases of effort. As Symantec says, the decrease may be a mirage if vulns are being held privately. That's the most important thing, is if it turns out that vulnerabilities are held privately, this is going to change what we think we can measure. Here's a prediction. Vista, whatever you think of it, has made it hard enough that amateurs working at home for funsies are not likely to find vulnerabilities. Consequently, of all vulnerabilities that have been found in Vista, the percentage that are held privately by people who are doing it for trade is going to rise relative to the percentage of those that are held by people who are doing it for fun. What is the impact of that? I'm not certain. But it does say that in a market share sense, I don't have a slide for this, in